Let's look at changing permissions on files and folders. The command chmod or chmod helps us to do that. In the current folder, we have a file.txt and there is a folder log_folder. Both of these belong to this particular user. Every file and folder has a group associated with it, and the group is users. What that means is anyone belonging to this particular group will be allowed certain permissions on that file, or if it is a folder, on that folder. For this file and folder, the user is Topcat and the group is users. For this particular user, the permissions on this file are read, write, and there is no execute permission. For anyone belonging to the group users, the permissions on this file are read and there is no write and execute. For everyone else, it is read and there is no write and execute. For the folder, this particular user has read, write and execute permissions. Execute so that the user is able to add and remove folder entries from this particular folder. And anyone belonging to the group users is allowed to read, not write, but also allowed to execute. And everyone else is also allowed to read and execute. So if there is another user, let's say on the other terminal, and that user is not the owner but belongs to this group users, then that user is able to only read from the file, not write to it. So if we were to do groups, we can see that this particular user belongs to the group called users. And if we try to write something to that file, we get a permission denied. Why? Because this particular user is not the owner of the file, but that user belongs to this group. Still, the user is unable to write because the group does not have write permission on the file. We can use this chmod command to give write permission to anyone belonging to this group on that file. The way that we do that is chmod followed by the permissions that we want to change. We want to change the permission for the group on the file, and we want to add a permission, so plus, and the permission that we want to add is write. So R for read, W for write, and X for execute. So here we are giving the group, we are adding a permission, enabling a permission, and that permission is write. And we want to execute it on that particular file. If we do this and check the permissions again, we can see that the group users has received write permission, which means that this particular user who belongs to that group will now be able to write data to the file. And we can see that that command which failed with permission denied goes through. Now the syntax for chmod doesn't have to be one entity with what operation or permission we are setting on it. let's say that we want to remove the write permission from the group. We can do that with g minus w, and let's say that we want to allow the user, which is represented by u, to have execute permission also. So we can specify as many of these permissions separated by a comma on file.txt. And if we were to look at it now, we can see that file.txt has now changed to indicate that it is executable by the user, because we enabled that permission for that user. And group, which had write permission over here, it has gone back to no write permission because we removed it with g minus w. So that's for files. For folders, let's look at the contents of the log folder. We can see that there is a file inside of that folder with log.txt. Let's say that we want to allow the group to be able to write to this folder and also to every entry recursively in that folder. The way that we do that is using the -r flag, which tells the command to apply the permission that we mention recursively on all the entries starting from the directory. So if we were to give the group write permission and we were to give the group execute permission, but let's say that we want to remove the read from others. So others is mentioned by O, and we want to remove the read from it. We can mention it like that, and we run it. And if we were to examine the permissions on that folder, we can see that others do not have read permission on the directory. And if we were to look at the contents, the file inside has now become executable by the users because of g plus x, and it is also writable by the group because of g plus w, and others have been removed with the read permission, so others cannot read it. So that's the chmod command, which helps us to change permissions. And here we have looked at changing the permissions with alphabetical notations or user-friendly notations with letters on both files and directories.